right now, millions of people are walking around with voices in their heads.
Yeah, quite literally.
Right, but not their own internal monologues, like the voices of total strangers, just whispering stories and secrets directly into their ears through headphones.
It's an incredibly intimate act when you really think about it.
It really is, having someone else's voice physically resonating inside your skull. Yet most of us, we just treat it like background noise while we commute or wash the dishes.
Well, yeah, because it is entirely normalized in our culture now. But when you step back and look at the actual mechanics of it, audio broadcasting is basically a masterclass in the architecture of intentional connection.
The architecture of intentional connection, I like that.
Yeah, and that hidden architecture, like how we deliberately manufacture closeness, is really the invisible thread running through everything we are unpacking today.
So it's all connected.
Exactly. We are looking at the blueprints for how humans connect with an invisible audience, how we maintain intimacy with a partner, how we find profound meaning in a daily ritual like drinking coffee, and critically, how we rebuild those connections when our lives inevitably catch fire and change.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we are going on a journey to understand how human connection actually works, I want to welcome you listening right now, right into the middle of this journey with us. We are taking this deep dive together.
Absolutely.
So to start, let's examine the mechanics of that invisible connection I just mentioned. Talking to someone you can't even see. I was looking through this guide from Podlad detailing expert tips for hosting audio shows, and it exposes the psychological tricks required to build intimacy in a one-way medium.
Right, and the foundational premise there is that audio is mostly consumed in isolation. You are a voice in a single person's head.
Just one person.
Exactly. So the moment a host addresses the audience as a collective, saying things like, "Hey listeners," or "Welcome everybody," they instantly break that illusion of intimacy.
Because I'm suddenly just one of a million people in a crowd.
You got it. The guide highlights this creator, Jay Klaus, who has a really effective opening. He starts his shows by simply saying, "Hello, my friend."
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, by refusing to address a crowd, he prevents what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. He pulls the person out of a massive, faceless audience and places them into a psychologically safe one-on-one bubble.
But that one-on-one bubble isn't just linguistic, right? It's literally engineered through physical space.
Oh, definitely.
Because the guide insists on keeping the microphone exactly a finger length away from your mouth. When you speak from that specific distance, you capture the low-frequency resonance of your vocal cords.
Which audio engineers call the proximity effect.
Right, the proximity effect. And it registers in the human brain as physical closeness. Like if you lean back, you suddenly sound roomy.
And your brain subconsciously registers that the person speaking is standing way across the room.
Which completely breaks the intimacy. It's like the difference between broadcasting to a stadium and whispering a secret in one friend's ear.
Which perfectly aligns with how they instruct hosts to ask questions, too. Tip number 2 and 7 are all about extreme word economy and replacing what questions with why questions.
Wait, why better than what?
Well, a lazy interviewer asks, "Tell me about yourself," or "What do you do?" And that just prompts a rehearsed resume. But asking, "Why did you make that choice?" forces the guest off their script.
It demands a real story.
Exactly. And stories require emotional exposure.
And the guide goes even further on that point with tip number 8, which is about actively limiting your own interruptions to let the guest shine.
Right, which goes against our natural instincts.
Totally. Because in normal conversation, jumping in with an "oh, me too" feels like active listening. But in an interview setting, jumping in actually rescues the guest from the tension of silence.
Yes, you have to let the silence stretch.
Yeah, and that negative space is usually where the guest drops their guard and shares something truly vulnerable. But here's my specific question for you.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you are a creator, right, and you're recording completely alone in a soundproof room, literally talking to a piece of metal on a stand, how do you artificially manufacture that one-on-one intimacy without it sounding incredibly forced or honestly just a little creepy?
Well, the secret lies entirely in intention. You don't manufacture intimacy by faking some late-night radio whisper.
Right.
You manufacture it by holding a specific, real person in your mind's eye while you speak. You aren't broadcasting to a demographic target. You are speaking to one person with a specific problem you are trying to help them solve.
So it's not about the tone of voice.
No, not at all. The intimacy isn't in the volume of your voice. It is rooted in the extreme intentionality of your focus.
Wow. And that pure intention isn't just essential for keeping an unseen audience engaged. It's the exact same mechanism required to keep a relationship healthy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because just as you have to tailor your words for a specific listener, building deep intimacy in a romantic partnership requires tailoring your physical actions to a specific partner.
So we are shifting from the intention of words to the intention of action.
Exactly.
Most people are familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman's 5 love languages, right?
Yeah.
Words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, physical touch, and acts of service.
Right, the classics.
But an analysis we reviewed from Cerebral looks really closely at acts of service, and it reveals a massive misconception. People often conflate this love language with grand, sweeping, cinematic romantic gestures.
Like holding a boombox outside a window.
Exactly. But in reality, it is purely about observational intentionality.
It's the initiative to step up and ease a psychological burden for your partner without being asked, like making their morning coffee or taking on a chore.
Right. But the crucial element is that giving an act of service requires studying your partner's specific stress points.
So if your partner actually finds cooking joyful and relaxing, but they absolutely loathe doing the laundry stepping in to cook dinner, isn't really an act of service.
No, it might be nice, but it's not an act of service. Doing their dreaded laundry is the actual act of service.
Because the psychological goal isn't just doing work.
Exactly. The goal is providing tangible proof of dedication. Psychological studies back this up. Words can be empty, but actively taking a dreaded task off someone's plate provides undeniable evidence that you care about their peace of mind.
That makes total sense. And this applies beautifully to long-distance relationships, too.
Oh, definitely. You can't physically fold their laundry from 3 states away.
Right, but you can get creative with virtual assistants, like ordering their groceries when you know they have a brutal work week, or planning the logistics of a visit with incredibly high intent so they don't have to manage any of the stress.
It's basically being a loving project manager for your partner's life.
Okay, I love that analogy. A loving project manager. But the analysis also points out that there's a delicate ecosystem here, right?
Yeah, receiving requires expressing clear gratitude, otherwise the giver builds resentment.
Right. But let's flip that dynamic. Let's push back on this for a second.
Great.
What if you know they hate laundry, so you take it on, but you secretly resent doing it the entire time? Like you are sighing, you're annoyed, slamming the washing machine door.
We've all been there.
Right. Does the act of service still count because the clothes ultimately get clean, or does your bad vibe ruin the entire gesture?
The resentment completely destroys the gesture.
Really? Even though the chore is done?
Yes. If we return to the core mechanism, an act of service is about intentionally easing a psychological burden. If you do the laundry with palpable resentment, you aren't easing their burden.
Oh, you're just shifting it.
Exactly. You are simply trading a physical chore for a cloud of emotional guilt. The partner now feels indebted and anxious about your bad mood.
Because the primary mission is to say, I care about your peace of mind.
Right. And injecting a toxic mood into the house actively works against the very connection you are trying to build. The intention must be as clean as the clothes.
The intention is the actual gift, not the folded shirts.
Precisely.
Well, speaking of clean intentions and daily rituals, let's look at one of the most common acts of service there is. Making someone a cup of coffee.
A very classic act of service.
Because when you zoom out from a single kitchen, coffee isn't just an intimate ritual between partners. It functions as a literal, universal bridge between humans.
It really does. It serves as a fascinating sociological tool. A beautifully written piece we reviewed from the Keep Calm and Drink Coffee blog illustrates how coffee reliably overcomes cultural barriers.
Yeah, the author shares these incredibly specific, grounded examples.
Like Thomas Love in Subotica. He shares traditional Turkish coffee alongside Macedonian candy.
And Layla in Georgia, who uses the ritual of coffee as a natural opening to share insights about her local culture, serving it alongside Sulguni cheese and explaining its similarities to mozzarella.
It's amazing. The shared ritual literally lowers our defensive barriers.
It's this messy, beautiful, organic human exchange. But to make that organic exchange possible on a global scale, the coffee industry relies on an obsessive, rigorous scientific foundation.
Which is such a crazy contrast.
It really is. Looking at the grading standards from the Specialty Coffee Association, the SCA, the contrast between the romantic cultural experience and the clinical science is just jarring.
Oh, the SCA standards are incredibly intense.
Just to grade a specialty green coffee bean, the manual mandates a 350-gram sample.
Right.
And it has to be evaluated on a black mat exactly 2 feet by 2 feet.
Under full spectrum lighting of at least 4,000 Kelvin.
What's fascinating here is that this intense standardization is necessary because coffee is an incredibly volatile agricultural product.
Right. Consider the SCA's strict rule on water activity. They represent it as AW. The standard dictates it must be strictly lower than 0.70 AW.
Which sounds like just pure snobbery.
It does, but it isn't. Water activity measures the unbound water available inside the bean for microorganisms to grow.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, if that number gets too high, you invite molds like Aspergillus acraceus.
And we care about that specific mold because it produces a toxic mycotoxin called ochratoxin A.
Exactly. And that toxin thrives perfectly at a water activity of 0.97. Keeping the bean below 0.70 is basically a hard biological firewall to protect the consumer.
And the brewing rules are just as mathematical.
Oh yeah, they require 8.25 grams of coffee per 150 milliliters of water.
A target pH of exactly 7.0. The water has to hit the grounds at exactly 200 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take 2 degrees.
And to hit the Golden Cup standard, you have to achieve an extraction yield of exactly 18 to 22%.
I mean, this sounds more like prepping a chemistry experiment for NASA than making a morning beverage. So let me ask you this. Does imposing such strict mathematical standardization on coffee kill the cultural universal language magic of it? Or is that strictness the exact thing that elevates it to an art form?
It actually enables the magic. The mechanism here is about precision unlocking potential.
How so?
Why exactly 200 degrees Fahrenheit? Because the specific molecular flavor compounds that taste like blueberries or jasmine in a specialty bean, they only dissolve and extract at precise kinetic energy levels.
Oh, I see.
Too cold, you get sour under-extracted acids. Too hot, you extract bitter tannins. Think of it like an orchestra tuning their instruments before a symphony.
Okay.
That 18 to 22% extraction yield is tuning the strings. It removes the dissonance, the toxins, and the distracting slaws. So when Tomaslov and Subotica brews that cup, the math ensures the music of human connection can actually be heard without interference.
Wow, that makes the math feel entirely purposeful. Which brings us to what actually happens inside the human brain when you consume that perfectly tuned cup of coffee with absolute mindful intention.
Yes, we examined a fascinating qualitative study presented at the IASDR conference called Designing Psychological Transformation.
Right, and the researchers wanted to map the internal cognitive journey of mindfulness.
They took 9 participants, ranging from 30 to 69 years old, with varied analytical careers. Like one was a medical lab tech, another was a tea brand designer, and they guided them through an immersive coffee tasting.
They mapped this journey into 5 distinct stages of psychological transformation, and the mechanics of how the brain responds are incredible.
So what's the first stage?
Stage 1 is the sensory opening. It's the moment your brain stops filtering out the environment. Like participant 1 was captivated simply by drinking coffee from a tiny cup that felt like it was meant for hard liquor.
And participant 8 suddenly registered a faint woody fragrance in the room.
Exactly.
By locking their focus onto those minute sensory details, they naturally transition into stage 2, which is immersive perception. This is where the brain's default mode network, the part responsible for background anxiety and our internal to-do lists, starts to quiet down.
And when you limit your sensory input to just the present moment, it literally distorts your perception of time.
Yeah. Participant 1 noted that she completely forgot she had kids for a moment and felt like she was single again, just existing without obligations.
And participant 8 described the sensory immersion as feeling like he had walked barefoot out of a modern building and stepped directly into the soil of a tropical rainforest.
From a single cup of coffee.
Right. That brings us to stage 3, mindful experience. This is the crucial step of grounding into the present moment without judgment.
Participant 4 is the perfect example of this. She's self-identified as someone who is highly critical, always looking for flaws in her daily life.
But because she was guided to stay mindful, when she tasted an undesirable flavor in the coffee, her brain didn't trigger a frustration response.
She used her critical nature to observe the flaw with curiosity, completely devoid of anger.
That non-judgmental observation unlocks stage 4, internal brand transformation. The object stops being a mere product and becomes an active participant in an experience of self-care.
Participant 3 used a brilliant theatrical metaphor for this. She called the coffee the lead actor, but realized it required the supporting cast of the quiet room, the ceramic cup, and her own mindfulness to truly deliver a performance.
Which finally leads to stage 5, behavioral intention. The participants walked away wanting to share the specific experience with others. Not because the coffee scored highly on a metric, but because of a deep, personal, emotional resonance.
The researchers refer to this framework as more than human design.
Oh, I love that term.
It's the concept that we are constantly co-designing our experiences with non-human entities, like the plants we consume, the objects we hold, and the environments we sit in.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like turning off the autopilot on an airplane. Suddenly you have your hands on the controls and you can feel the resistance of every single breeze.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So, if this more than human sensory design works so well for coffee, could we apply it to something totally mundane, like doing the laundry from our acts of service discussion earlier?
Absolutely, because mindfulness is just the application of focused attention. It isn't restricted to luxury experiences.
So how would that work for folding laundry?
Well, if you apply those 5 stages, stage 1 is forcing your brain to notice the physical reality, the woven texture of the fabric, the specific scent of the detergent.
Okay.
In stage 2, you let the repetitive, rhythmic motion of folding quiet your default mode network, letting go of your to-do list.
Right, you just focus on the folding.
And by the time you reach stage 4, you are no longer just completing a chore. You are actively engaging with the physical materials that keep the person you love warm and safe. You are co-designing an act of service with cotton and soap.
Wow, that reframes chores from a burden into a grounding ritual. But, we have spent this entire deep dive talking about building, deepening, and perfecting the structures that connect us.
Yeah, the positive side of connection.
But the hard truth of being human is that connections do not always last. Sometimes the structures, the daily rituals, or the relationships we rely on suddenly end or drastically change.
And navigating that kind of loss requires a completely different application of intentionality. To understand this, we reviewed a profound article by Jono Durkheim regarding mental health and transition.
He uses this evocative metaphor of a forest fire to describe navigating significant life changes.
Right, this could be a relationship ending, a massive shift in your career, or leaving a community you loved.
When a metaphorical fire burns down the ecosystem of our lives, our nervous system immediately kicks into survival mode. Fight, flight, or freeze.
And Durkheim points out that modern society actively enables this biological panic by telling us to just move on, to put it behind us as quickly as possible.
But by rushing forward to escape the discomfort, we completely bypass the deeper work of reflection.
To explain why that reflection is so critical, Durkheim brings in Bowen family systems theory, specifically the concept of differentiation.
Differentiation. Okay, what is that exactly?
It's the psychological ability to see ourselves as both a part of the systems we are embedded in, but also clearly separate from them.
Oh, I see.
When a system burns down, if we lack differentiation, we become overfused and highly emotionally reactive. We literally lose our sense of identity in the ashes because we didn't know where the relationship ended and where we began.
He notes that when a forest regrows after a fire, it never looks exactly like the original ecosystem. Trying to replicate the exact past is a guaranteed failure.
Yeah, because the canopy allows different light in, the chemical composition of the soil has changed. Healthy regrowth requires honest reflection in the present.
And he offers these 3 vital reflection questions to ask while you're just sitting in the ashes. What aspects of the old system brought out the best in you? What are you proud of? And what are you carrying forward?
Notice how closely this mirrors the mindful coffee tasting from earlier.
Oh, you're right.
The tasting required participants to pause and notice the nuanced sensory details, rather than just gulping down the caffeine for energy.
So emotional survival requires pausing in the ashes of a transition to truly notice what we feel, rather than rushing to rebuild. It's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube if you just rush it.
Exactly. You have to process your grief and identity, rather than just gulping down the panic and rushing to build a new life.
But let me push back on the biology of this.
Okay, go for it.
If our literal biology, our nervous system, naturally forces us into a fight or flight state so we can survive a crisis and keep moving, are we working directly against our own evolutionary biology when we force ourselves to sit and reflect in the ashes?
We are working against our primitive biology, yes. but we are doing it using our advanced biology.
Okay, explain that.
Well, evolution designed the fight-or-flight response in our amygdala to save us from immediate physical threats, like a predator in the woods.
Right. Running away is the correct response to a literal fire.
Exactly. But modern structural changes, losing a job, navigating a divorce, these are not physical predators. If you let your amygdala dictate your response to an emotional transition, you will survive, sure.
But at what cost?
You will carry all the unresolved trauma, poor communication habits, and lack of boundaries directly into your next relationship. Sitting in the ashes and actively asking those reflective questions physically shifts your brain's activity away from the panicked amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and self-awareness.
It's like breaking a bone. If you force yourself to walk on a broken leg immediately just to survive the day, it's going to heal completely crooked and cause you pain for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Sitting in the ashes to reflect is the emotional equivalent of putting that bone in a cast so it can reset properly.
That is the perfect analogy. Survival is a biological reflex, but healthy regrowth is an intentional choice. And that choice is really the definitive narrative through line of all the concepts we explored today.
It really all ties together.
Whether you are speaking into a microphone with intense focus to reach one unseen listener's heart, or taking the initiative to quietly fold your partner's most hated laundry without resentment.
Or meticulously measuring the water activity of a green coffee bean to protect a stranger across the globe.
Or mindfully tasting the complex layers of a morning brew. Or sitting quietly in the ashes of a life transition to heal properly. The true secret to life is intentional connection. It is the absolute refusal to live your life on autopilot.
Refusing the autopilot. I love that. And I want to sincerely thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Taking the time to explore these complex ideas with us is your own act as intentional connection, and we deeply appreciate you joining the conversation.
Thanks for being here.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. What if the ultimate act of service isn't really about doing a physical chore or buying the perfect gift at all? What if the absolute greatest service you can offer to the world is simply bringing your complete, undivided, mindful attention to whoever or whatever is standing right in front of you today?